Everyone pretends they understand dating apps now. We swipe, match, exchange a few lines, and then nothing. Someone disappears mid-conversation, and we act like that's normal. We refresh the app, shrug it off, and tell ourselves we didn't care anyway. The pretending is the interesting part. Because if we're honest, the moment still lands. You reread the last message. You wonder if you missed something. You wait a day longer than planned. It feels familiar, like staring at a silent answering machine in the 90s, except now the silence lives in your pocket. That's where words like ghosting, breadcrumbing, and situationship show up. They sound dramatic, but they're shorthand for new etiquette nobody formally agreed to. Dating apps didn't invent awkward exits. They compressed them, sped them up, and made them repeatable without explanation. Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge weren't designed to confuse people. They were built to introduce people efficiently. Profiles replaced introductions. Prompts replaced small talk. Filters replaced mutual friends. The shift was structural first. Once the structure changed, behavior followed naturally. In the analog world, disappearing required effort. You stopped calling, you avoided places, you committed to being unavailable. In the app world, disappearance is the default. Doing nothing is enough. No message becomes a message, whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not. That's why ghosting feels sharper than rejection. Rejection had form, a sentence, a tone, a closing. Ghosting has none of that. It leaves conversations unfinished, which keeps the mind circling. The app doesn't mark an ending. It just lets the thread hang open. Breadcrumbing works similarly, just slower. A like appears. A short reply arrives days later. Enough activity to keep things alive, not enough to move forward. It isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's boredom, indecision, or enjoying attention without wanting momentum. Then there's the situationship, which sounds new but isn't. It's clarity postponed indefinitely. Dating apps make this easier by offering endless alternatives. There's always another match waiting, which makes commitment feel premature and explanations feel optional rather than necessary. Even visibility changed. Hard launch and soft launch aren't really about romance. They're about audience control. Posting together or not posting together sends signals. Dating didn't become performative because people changed. It did because platforms made performance measurable. None of this means people became colder. The systems reward speed, optionality, and low-friction exits. Silence is efficient. Ambiguity avoids confrontation. The apps don't encourage cruelty, but they don't discourage it either, which quietly shapes behavior over time. So this is the landscape. Vanishing acts aren't personal mysteries. They're features of the environment. Before deciding what anything means, it helps to understand the rules of the room you're standing in and how movement is quietly encouraged there. That's what we're doing here, translating the playbook, not to win or fix anyone, just to understand the theater well enough to keep your footing, protect your expectations, and maybe hold onto your sense of humor along the way. By the time most people start looking up words like ghosting, the confusion has already done its work. Something odd happened, nobody explained it, and the internet supplied a vocabulary instead of an answer. That vocabulary sounds dramatic, but it's mostly shorthand for behavior that once took longer. Ghosting is the cleanest example. It's not a breakup or even a rejection. It's a silent exit. In the analog world, disappearing required effort. On apps, doing nothing accomplishes the same thing. No reply becomes the message, and the conversation sits unfinished, keeping the other person's mind circling. Because the platform doesn't mark an ending, the lack of closure lingers. A clear no ends the story. Silence stretches it out. The design allows that stretch, and the emotional weight lands unevenly, even though the mechanism itself is neutral and indifferent to how long someone waits. Breadcrumbing is the slower cousin. A like appears days later. A short reply arrives a week after that. Just enough activity to keep the thread alive, not enough to move it forward. Sometimes it's boredom, sometimes indecision, sometimes enjoying attention without committing to momentum. The important detail is that the system rewards breadcrumbing. It costs almost nothing to send a signal. There's no penalty for never following through. The structure makes low investment easy and delay consequence-free, which quietly encourages behavior that feels confusing on the receiving end. Situationship sounds new, but it isn't. Its clarity postponed indefinitely. Dating apps make this easier by offering endless alternatives. Another profile is always waiting, which makes commitment feel premature and explanations feel optional. Earlier, logistics forced decisions faster. Now logistics are mostly gone. Then there's the language of visibility. Hard launch and soft launch aren't really about romance. They're about audience control, posting together, not posting, tagging, or carefully not tagging sends signals. Dating became performative because platforms made performance measurable and visible. Low-effort texting fits neatly into this system. Short replies, delayed responses, no questions returned. Effort used to mean time and planning. A call showed intention. Now effort is measured by attention patterns, which are easier to fake and easier to withdraw without explanation. Hinge prompts and filters play a quieter role. Prompts replace small talk. Filters replace mutual friends. They're designed to accelerate sorting, not deepen understanding. Direct messages become the private lane where tone matters, but silence remains the most efficient exit. None of this means people suddenly became colder. The systems reward speed, optionality, and low-friction exits. Silence is efficient. Ambiguity avoids confrontation. The apps don't encourage cruelty, but they don't discourage it either, and behavior adjusts accordingly over time. The useful distinction is this. Some behaviors are rules of the environment, others are poses. Ghosting, breadcrumbing, and vague visibility choices explain how the room works more than how much someone valued the interaction itself. Once that clicks, disappearances stop feeling like personal riddles and start looking like environmental defaults. Understanding that doesn't fix the theater, but it does make it easier to keep your footing while standing in it, and to take exits without inventing meanings that were never there. At some point, it helps to change the angle instead of the behavior. The dating world didn't suddenly turn cruel, it just sped up, then added interfaces. Everyone pretends they understand what silence means now. That pretending is the most exhausting part. A message goes unanswered, and the brain fills the gap with theories, timelines, and self-interrogation, even though nothing new actually happened. The sting is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged plainly. Being ignored doesn't feel neutral, even when you understand the mechanics. But it also isn't a verdict on your value. It's a condition of the environment. Apps compress time, widen choice, and reward motion without closure. That doesn't make anyone uniquely careless. It makes silence efficient. Efficiency is rarely gentle. When an app allows exits without explanation, many people will take them, not out of malice, but because the system doesn't ask for more. Silence becomes the path of least resistance. Understanding that doesn't remove the feeling, but it relocates the cause from character to structure, which matters more than it sounds in practice. We've survived faster, messier systems before. Busy signals ended conversations mid-sentence. Answering machines preserved awkward pauses forever. Blind dates required optimism and a willingness to be wrong in public. None of that made people fragile. It taught pacing and recovery. Today's version lives in a pocket, updates constantly, and removes pauses that once forced reflection. What helps now isn't thicker skin or sharper instincts, it's cleaner interpretation. Low effort usually means low bandwidth, not hidden meaning. A delayed reply isn't a puzzle to solve, it's information about priority. Matching effort is the calm response. If energy arrives slowly, you slow with it. If it disappears, you stop leaning forward. Boundaries don't require announcements or speeches. They show up as choices. You decide how long a thread stays open. You decide when ambiguity stops being interesting. Exiting cleanly isn't dramatic. It's efficient. Silence already ended the exchange. You're simply acknowledging reality without adding commentary or self-justification to the moment. This is where dignity lives in the modern setup, not in winning attention, but in not chasing it, not in explaining yourself, but in recognizing when explanation isn't requested. The apps don't grade composure, but composure changes how the experience lands afterward and how much space it takes up in your head later. It also helps to separate theater from intent. Hard launches, soft launches, strategic posting, strategic not posting, these are signals for audiences, not contracts between two people. Reading them too closely gives them power they don't deserve. Most of it is pose, not promise, and treating it as such keeps expectations proportional. When effort is steady, things feel easy. When effort flickers, curiosity spikes. That sensation isn't chemistry, it's uncertainty doing its job. Once you can tell the difference, the pressure drops. You stop mistaking unpredictability for depth and stop investing energy where consistency hasn't been offered. The quiet skill here is choosing pace over panic. Let conversations earn continuation. Let interest prove itself through consistency, not novelty. When something ends without explanation, let it end without commentary. Closure doesn't always arrive as a sentence. Sometimes it arrives as a stopped pattern you choose not to revive. The useful perspective isn't that dating apps are broken. It's that they're honest about what they optimize for. Speed, choice, low-friction exits. Once you see that, you stop asking the system to deliver reassurance it was never designed to provide, and the experience becomes easier to navigate. And that's the last shift. Understanding the room doesn't make it warmer, but it does make it navigable. You keep your footing, you take exits cleanly, you leave without inventing meanings that were never there. That's not disengagement. That's fluency. This is old dog, new moves. I'll see you next time.